If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing.
Well, hello. So I was going to talk about Pharmakeia. There's so much in the world. As you look around in the streets, there's people that are drugged out on heroin and stuff. Just like the video, Paul Harvey, we listened to it, and people are on drugs and everything constantly. Look at Proverbs 14:12. It says, there is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. You know, this word that we are talking about today, we are talking about Pharmakeia, which is sorcery and witchcraft, used in magical arts, poisoning, ministering of drugs. You know, that's also where witchcraft, they get the word Wiccan witches. See how many people in the world you have maybe met that have been a Wiccan witch before or still are. You might have family members. See, we know like stories in the book of Acts. You got this Simon Magus who was called a witch, and he was doing many sorceries. We know that in Deuteronomy 18:10, the Bible tells us that anybody witchcraft or sorcery, they weren't to live. Thanks to the grace of Jesus Christ, people have a chance to repent from that now. But if they don't, same outcome as in Deuteronomy, they will not live. They will be casted into a lake of fire. We even see that Saul went to the witch of Endor. You know, it's funny because in Star Wars, there's a planet called Endor. See, the word witchcraft occurs throughout the Bible a lot. Divination, sorcery. Even in some of the Apocrypha, like the Book of Wisdom. I'm going to, as I've showed you this word here, we're going to go to one of the most predominant verses that everybody goes to. And it's in, of course, Revelation 18:23. And it says, "And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee, for thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." Isn't that true? I want to jump over to the book of Nahum, chapter 3, verse 4, where it says, "Because of the multitude of the whoredoms of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredom, and families through her witchcrafts." How many families have been destroyed over drugs? Think about it. Now in Galatians 5:20, we read idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variances, immolations, wrath, strife, sedations, heresies. Of course, it says all these, they will not inherit the kingdom of God. This is where we get the same word, Pharmakeia. But you know, there was many stories throughout the Bible before I show some more things up on the screen here. I want to go to 2 Kings, chapter 9, verse 22. And it says, "And it came to pass when Joram saw Jehu that he said, Is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, What peace? So long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many." I tell you what, the Jezebel and her witchcrafts. I love how the book of Micaiah, in the book of Micaiah, chapter 5, verse 12, it says, "I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers." A lot of people are falling victim of being soothsayers. They don't even realize it. They don't even realize that they're falling victim to soothsaying. An enchanter, the exurber of times. A lot of people place dates on things all the time. But of course, the world nowadays doesn't want to listen to Old Testament. So don't mean anything to them. We also see there's another word that tells us about sorceries, or one who prepares or uses these magical remedies. It even calls it a druggist or a poisoner. And it comes from the Greek word.
Strong's G 5332. Pharmakeia. Pharmakeia.
And we see this in Revelation 21:8. This is when this verse is used. "But the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the whoremongers and the sorcerers and the idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." Not my word. So we're going to go to this Greek goddess called Hecate. And in the ancient Greek religions and mythology, she was known to hold a pair of torches, A key, snakes were accompanied by dogs. You know, it was in later times they made her a three-sided statue of three different people. So I'm going to go right here, this picture here. Hecate, the queen of witches. She has the RX symbol on it. You know what's so funny about that? Is when we go, places like Etsy sells this statue for only $117. You can buy this thing that God hates. But people are so blinded by the witchcraft, so blinded by these things. You know, look at the Pope. He has that staff. It's no different than the Baphomet statue. You know, it's not just that. We look at the Vatican, how it looks like a serpent. Looks like a serpent. Of course, people don't want to see that. You know, Rockefeller back in the day, which is a big name, not just in oil, but a big name in the pharmaceutical business. He said, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. What a better way to get a nation of workers, because you don't think when your mind is clouded. The Lord tells us to have a sober mind, so we ain't got our judgments clouded. There's so many things in this world. Pharmakeia, the sorcerer's wand. Here's another picture of inside this room in the Vatican. Straight up looks like a serpent. People beguiled by the man that claims to come in the name of Christ, but he doesn't. You know what's so funny about this Greek goddess that people have served? First of all, down here, if I scroll down a little bit, Diana and Artemis, I have a 7 churches revelation study where we talk about the church of Ephesus, and they were guilty of serving Diana or Artemis. NASA has an Artemis project. I talk about all this and that. And Diana is actually the same Diana that they have that plays Wonder Woman inside of that. Isn't that crazy how they hide these things? But you know what's so associated with her? The crossroads. Okay, so you have these deities, these mythological thresholds, gates, or doorways where they try to get people to come through, or the dying and rising of the deities, and the resurrections where they mock the Almighty. These entranceways, the nights, the light, the magic, the witchcraft, the moon, the knowledge of herbs and poisonous plants, graves, ghosts, necromancy, and sorcery. You know what's also really funny? When we look at this picture here, okay, she's known to hold a torch in her hand. Okay, what else holds a torch in its hand? Statue of Liberty? Not saying there's really any connection here, but you see the same type of spiky hairdo, you could say. Okay, so before I go any further, I'm going to get rid of that and that one. There's been a lot of talks about Pharmakeia a lot lately. The pushing of all these medicines everybody's doing. And of course, this statue here, in the 7 churches of Revelation, we do a more deeper, in-depth study of this. I'll share the podcast at the end of these if nobody has seen them. It's all over. The medical services, the staff. It's all over the place. By their witchcraft and sorceries, they deceive the nations. You know, they're pushing so much stuff right now. Why do you think? In the Egyptian origin of this, it was an Egyptian goddess of fertility and childbirth. And that, you know, a lot of people always served these to get fertility back then. They had these sacred animals that they talked about, but sacred plants. One thing here I want to talk about, the sacred plants. They're in particular about yew trees. I don't know if a lot of people actually know about yew trees, but they are in particular type of tree in Western Europe and Central Europe and Southern Europe, Great Britain, Ireland, Northwest Africa, Northern Iran, Southwest Asia, typically known as yew, English yews, European yews, common yews. But they do have a toxicity to them, a poison. But they're also used in essential oils and all types of other things. So first and foremost, we see from WebMD, they like to use it to treat cancers. Also, it causes abortion. Isn't that crazy? It causes abortion. A lot of people pushing abortion right now. A lot of people pushing it and they want it. So they call this a goddess of the underworld, of witchcraft, of the moon, of all of these things. You know, there was a movie, as I'm digging through this, I found this on all these Wikipedias flowing back and forth, that Wes Craven made back in 1988 called The Serpent and the Rainbow. And it talks about this guy has an experience investigating some story, who this person was allegedly poisoned, buried alive, and revived by some herbal brew and came back as a zombie. And that's where I want to go to. If you look at like Kingston, Philadelphia right now, it's like The Walking Dead, zombies all over the place, skin-eating flesh viruses from the drugs, the trank dope that they're doing. All the way back in the beginning of this, we listened to Paul Harvey. If I was the devil, I would get people high on pills, brainwash them. So, you know, this movie was practiced in voodoo and shamans and all these things. Like I said, what does the Statue of Liberty have to do with it? Maybe nothing. But we know its design and style comes from the same type of design and styles that made the idols of Hecate, who has the RX symbol all over. We know that the Statue of Liberty comes from the goddess of freedom that was worshipped in ancient Rome. You know, we did a video, also share that it wasn't too long ago. It was about the 33-degree Freemason Scottish Rite and just all the obelisks throughout the world. So, you know, like I said, it's really funny because there's a few things I want to go through with this Hecate, this mythological. But at the same point, people are trapped by the medicine, the drugs. I already showed you the Vatican, the snake. You know, they sit here and they got the snakes, the pair of torches, the crossroads, the entranceways. You know, what's coming up in media a lot right now? Gatekeepers. It's all over the place about gatekeepers. Everybody's talking about gatekeepers right now. You know, there was a lot of ways gatekeepers are talked about throughout the day. Sometimes they're bouncers of a club, a city gate. They even have watchmen as it, or a judge. But we know that there is some realms of some of these places that have worship, this temple, where they count these people as gatekeepers. So maybe a little bit of what we're hearing, the word gatekeeper all the time, who runs the world? The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Vatican, Pharmakeia, the pharmaceutical business. So these shamans who think that they can really use drugs and travel into the spirit world are really actually just under the spell of the Jezebel, under the spell of the witchcraft and sorcery. We can't astro project ourselves. That's the same type of thing that they say that you can do from this goddess. You can have these crossroads, these entrance ways. You can do all these astro projecting, and where they talk about third eyes and all this stuff. You know, I'm going to go to one more verse real quick. I want to go back all the way to Exodus 7, verse 11. Then the Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantments. Okay. Depending on if you're reading it in Hebrew or in the Septuagint, it would actually be pharmakos if it was in Greek. And there's actually rituals with this where they have seen that they have a criminal that was chosen, expelled from the community of times of disaster, invasion, famines, plagues, whatever, whatever these Christs are, they have these rituals. And we see a lot of ancient Greek, a lot of satanic and pagan and Wiccan type of rituals they do. They use herbal type of stuff. It's really funny that we look at the Hecate, the one that's really big served at it being about pharmacy, was big about yew trees, which are used to do chemotherapy and also kill the babies. But remember, the Bible tells us there's nothing new under the sun. Everything we see is stuff that happened before. It doesn't matter. The things that happened back then will happen now, but except the difference with now compared to back then, we have this sorcery and enlightenment through television, things like that. Maybe I'm crazy for digging up some of this stuff. Maybe some people think that. Doesn't really matter. All I know is I used to be under the spell of the pharmaceutical business. I'm not saying that trying to convict people if, because most of your medicine bottles say RX on it. And yeah, there is a Wiccan statue of a goddess that has RX written all over it. I always say take everything to the Lord. I know that the Lord can heal anybody and take anybody off any medicine, but I also know that people like Luke in the Bible, who wrote the book of Acts and the book of Luke, he was a doctor, a physician. I know that some things can be used for the right reasons, but I also know that the evil of this world uses everything just as much, if not more, to trick, to convince. We have got to be living our lives right now as if we were a total of maybe, let's just say 30 seconds from Christ's return. Why not? Why don't we live like we just 30 seconds from Christ's return right now? Maybe that would put a reverence and a fear into the nations to serve God with all their might, with all their soul, with all their heart. So much love to you all. May God bless you. And remember, the Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Much love.